international experience in performance and transformation management for multi-channel and digital businesses. From various executive leaderships in travel industry, he is attuned to what makes the difference for running and transforming those businesses. He has been a veteran of this industry, and I would like to invite Mr. Joerg Esser on the stage. And sir, please introduce yourself and begin the panel we are awaiting.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. I mean, this event is primarily about networking. It is about getting to know people, businesses, and eventually, to a large extent, it's also about designing, coming up with new partnerships. Whether those are strategic or not, well, that's to be seen, but it's primarily about those kind of partnerships. So I would like to spend the next 3/4 of an hour with you to dive a little bit into the thinking behind it. And I'm keenly aware that this is a very broad topic, so maybe, and there are different angles to look at the topic. So just as a quick review, what my angle is on the topic. I've held various executive roles within the Thomas Cook Group. I've been working with Expedia, Booking.com, and Webjet on designing, negotiating, and implementing partnerships. And I'm now working primarily on designing those partnerships for larger corporations, airlines, hospitality groups, intermediaries, but equally so supporting startups in building those partnerships. I mean, just on the recent panel, we had the fair point that startups are also challenged with limited resources, so they need to pivot, they need to have a very strong focus. And my take and my experience is that eventually, whatever scale the partnership is, it boils down to the same, well, if you like, frame of thinking. And I would like to share that frame with you. Might be that one or the other aspect is a bit too corporate, so we will pivot this or potentially skip this. We had great sessions yesterday. We heard in several sessions that travel is obviously a quite turbulent space. There's lots going on, and what that means for the customer is that the journey is very fragmented. We also heard yesterday that before someone books a holiday, there's an average of around 50 contact points with different parties to get inspired before actually the booking takes place. So obviously there are lots of opportunities out there for customers, and unfortunately there's also quite some confusion out there. And the reason for that being, of course, is that there's lots going on in that space. And actually, I dared to sketch a little bit the landscape, and the thing is, if you do that for travel, by the time you're done, by the time you show it, it's out of date. So this chart certainly is out of date. However, in essence, what we are seeing in travel over the last years is that there are the variety of routes to the customer is just increasing. So we used to work in a very linear world where there are suppliers, intermediaries, and then there are marketing players, if you like. And this world is obviously changing, and we are more moving to a value network. So just very broadly, between the suppliers and the customer, there are the, well, searchers, marketing companies, and there are new ones coming, primarily on the search end, the intermediaries next to the incumbents. There are new ones coming up, and then there are also players working directly with the suppliers and suppliers building their own things. So this is a broad area of opportunities, but of course it requires navigation in this area. And we mentioned startups, and of course each and everyone has a certain watch list of startups, and the same holds what I mentioned to the previous charts. By the time you make your list, you're usually outdated, and there are obviously startups of all kinds, and I certainly won't run through all of those, and some of them are already big shots. by the time that we have this session right now. Some are very exotic. I mean, if you think in the kind of businesses that companies invest in, I mean, you get examples like, for instance, intermediaries or a C-Trip investing in Boom, in supersonic travel. So that's just an extreme example that those kinds of investments pretty much are all over the place by now. And, well, you can discuss whether we are seeing a trend. I would argue so. I would argue there's a trend of moving away from business propositions that try to offer everything and do everything by themselves and rather partner up. Well, I just pulled out the recent news on Ryanair. I mean, Ryanair is obviously doing very well, great and successful. They've very prominently announced the Amazon of travel proposition and ambition, and I think also on this one they are doing very well. I just found it remarkable that this month they pulled back with their holiday proposition. I mean, that doesn't mean they will successfully do other things. However, for me, this somehow is a reminder of even being very successful doesn't mean necessarily that you need to do everything by yourself. On the opposite, it doesn't mean that you cannot have a very broad portfolio that works. Companies like Booking Holding also have a very broad portfolio. The point is you just need to govern it very carefully to make sure that you don't get a too complex business. I mean, there are obviously other things playing. We saw on the watch list Hotel Tonight. Obviously, Hotel Tonight, meanwhile, doesn't belong on the watch list anymore. It's a very rapidly growing and highly attractive player, showing that in this arena, it's not all for the big ones only. So there are sweet spots to start with, and usually those sweet spots are based on very simple business propositions, and we will get to this one. So as far as the acquisition by Airbnb goes, well, firstly, the discussion is already on for a year. It might still be on for a year from now. We shall see, and maybe that's something later on for the networking event. Without running through too many stats, I guess it's fair to agree on basically three trends. Yes, it is turbulent. It is the customers raising the bars, getting used by standards that are being set across industries, and the boundaries between businesses blur. And to be fair, they blur because opportunities grow to link up with other businesses. Connectivity is becoming seamless. It's not fully seamless yet, but it is way more seamless than it used to be quite some years ago. And this, of course, also sparks opportunities to partner up. If you then go a bit deeper into running businesses, this very quickly translates into a couple of quite fundamental challenges that you can spend quite some time on, and that you can obviously, as if it's everything in life, make many mistakes on, and they're usually very fundamental. You get the pendulum of concentration versus diversification. So on the one side, customer, you would like to offer something simple and comprehensive to the customer, which means you better have a very broad portfolio and an end-to-end solution. But reversely, when you look to your operating model, that infuses quite some complexity because you need to do many things at once, and nowadays that means you need to excel in many things at once. You get the discussion about central and decentral activities, how much bundling across unities. Well, that's probably more corporate topic, and you can get the classical make or buy, where my take is, and we will get to this, it's not about make or buy anymore because it is about master or partner. So you either master what you're doing, or you need to partner with someone. And it's not buying. It is not. There aren't suppliers that are graciously serving other companies. This is shifting. There are partnerships because in networks, in business networks, there's no such a thing like a hierarchy. So someone who appears small to you can be very big by partnering up with someone else and then have a different relevance in another context for you. So this is why I think the make or buy perception is about being parked. And as if this is not enough, there's of course so much hype going on and so many discussions going on that, yes, sure enough, I mean, you somehow need to be aware about what's playing around you. And that is crucial, but very often that kind of confuses the picture and takes the attention away from what you should really focus on, and particularly in an environment of opportunity that usually requires even more of a clear direction and a clear strategy on where to go. I must say, spending quite some time in the corporate world, this cartoon isn't too far from reality. So if you're lucky enough to work for a startup, you can probably still smile about that. There are many companies where this is everyday activity. So, I mean, what is the solution? The solution isn't necessarily a big one. That's another mindset. I mean, big challenges do not require big solutions. It is a fairly simple one, but as with many things, simple things in life, it's everything but easy. So what's necessary in a jungle of opportunities, highly competitive jungle of opportunities, is two things. That's my take. It's on one side, your aim should be to simplify your business, and we will get to what that means in an instance. And the other part is partnering up. What I mentioned, it is more about even teaming up rather than thinking supplier and graciously receiving a big company or something. It is about teaming up. But it is very tough walking that talk. And I'm focusing a lot about simplifying business models. I would argue that the travel space has seen quite some proof and is seeing quite some proof that those kind of models are successful. This is only a selection again, and it's not comprehensive. So it is possible even, obviously what those companies showed, that its simplicity allows even to wrestle the giants. I mean, if you recall, like 2-3 years ago, the notion was a little bit like, well, the OTA business, intermediary business, there's still quite some consolidation left to be done, and then this game is pretty much over. And I guess it's equally fair to say that it's far from over, and it's companies like those, not only those companies, which really steer up the competition, and they do so with focusing on simplicity. So the framework and the thinking that I'm offering, and that at least played out usefully in the context that I work in, is a 3-step framework, and I prefer to call it a detox framework, just to make it a bit, exaggerate maybe a little bit, the point that usually in businesses, particularly in corporate businesses, but also in smaller businesses, there are toxic elements that sneak into the business. Even if you're a startup, with the opportunities that you gain along your road, grows the temptation to take on those opportunities and grow the resources for you to do so. So this is a reason why usually companies and businesses over time get cluttered. And that's where, for me, the detox thinking kicks in. And that's basically 3 steps. Before you detox and you take away what's toxic, well, obviously you need to know what isn't toxic and what you're after. So you need to define your core offering. And again, all this is fairly straightforward, but then in practice, if you're challenged what you're doing, there are enough villains in the game, so to speak, that keep you from just stringently doing so. Well, detoxing in essence then means that you focus on those activities that you can truly master. Not those activities that you somehow happen to have in your business because you always did it, or there's an opportunity to do that, or you could also do it. Given that there are no hurdles and market entry boundaries anymore, or they are diminishing at least. I mean, every business can pretty much do everything and start doing everything right now. So if you're doing 3 things, then there's someone out there who only does one of those 3 things, and it's just straightforward that this someone will outperform you because that someone has a stronger focus. So detoxing your operations basically means only do yourself what you can truly master. Don't offer a portfolio of some things that are great and then you do 5 other things that you are sort of great and 3 more things that you always used to do, so while stop it. That's too long of a sentence and too long of an operational guideline, so that's what detox is about. And then the last part that might apply more to corporate organizations, it's a decluttering part. So declutter your organization, or if you turn the table, if you're in a smaller business, make sure your business doesn't get cluttered. And as I mentioned, this is a natural tendency to get clutters. Opportunities and resources create temptation, and off you go, and cause complexity. Well, if you look into the different steps, of course, define the offering. I mean, that's a bit abstract, but that very quickly boils down to what to offer to the customer. We had the discussion before, raising the bar. We had great panels, great sessions yesterday where we went into what customers are after. We just had the content sessions before this session where we went into the detail and how to actually be relevant for customers. So I won't go into all the details, but that's obviously the part where everything starts. And again, this isn't new. I mean, there are tons of statistics out there proving that the more you focus on your customer, the better you score on whatever KPI you decide to use for your business to measure that, the more valuable your business grows. This is an example for airlines, same holds for hospitality companies. You can pitch that and sketch that across industries. It's a very strong correlation. So this is very, very old news. But then still, why is it so difficult? And I just hijack, because I like it so much, the Google argument or the challenging question. Well, that translates into something like, why do toasters still burn toast? And their argument usually goes, well, it's almost possible to reach mass, but actually, why can a toaster not recognize when a toaster is done? And as I didn't just want to hijack that example from Google, I wanted to test it by myself, and be assured, I found the most sophisticated toasters. They would send a tweet from my account. They would inform me and send me an SMS whenever the toaster is ready, and I started thinking, what exactly is the use case here? So how long does it usually take, and how far away from the toaster am I that I need to be texted that my toaster at home is about to be coming out, while at the end it would anyway come out after 3 minutes or 2 minutes. If it was only so smart to have a camera and just tell me when it turns black, that must be possible. I'm not a technician, but that must be somehow possible to recognize black color in times like this. So it still doesn't work. So it's a great experience. It's really fun, but it's also quite frustrating part. And the same holds for companies and organizations. I mean, there's so much temptation out there to implement gimmickry, to go for the latest feature. And as I've been in corporations and in companies, I'm probably equally guilty of pursuing those gimmickries, that I'm just equally convinced that this is where the challenge part of it. We had the part on proposition is about simplicity. I mean, even companies relentlessly working on simplicity usually kick off the years with a new promise to customer of being even more simple. And then, of course, there's the notion that simplicity is everything but easy. And there are numerous examples. If you look at this, as we are talking travel right now, I mean, the most impressive example, and I've just had a session last week in Beijing and got the chance with Alibaba to experience their vision on how to sell travel, and most of you will probably know that. I'm still in the phase of being quite impressed by it, so I just shared. So if you look at that, it is everything but simple. So for the customer, if you enjoy content on Youku, that will be very customized content. So that will take place, a movie that will take place in a place of your liking, in your favorite city. There might be an event in a park, and you get something like, I would like to go to that park, or I would like to climb that mountain, which would directly out of the movie transfer you to, in that case, Fliggy, the Alibaba travel mall, where I purchase whatever I intend to purchase, and then at the end I get insured whatever I would like to get insured with micro insurances and financial in that specific case. For travel, that's still a bit new. I mean, if you only take the insurance part, I can usually decide whether I would like to be insured or not, and then I need to read 10 pages T&C to figure out what that actually means for me. So micro insurances, like I would just like to be insured against a delay of 10 minutes, isn't there yet, but in in consumer good industries, Alibaba is already playing that game. And I think that shows simple proposition is everything but simple. So the key question, straightforward, 2 dimension basically. How can to be more relevant? That's what Define is about. How to improve the existing offer. So, and yet that's usually the exercise that Disney used to train this industry for, like defining friction points and then relentlessly investing into resolving those friction points, i.e. those decisions that keep my customers from enjoying this. And many cruises, many hospitality companies, back then we at Thomas Cook, we also adapted that framework. So I would argue that is quite established. What to offer in addition is a service, a question which is increasingly relevant because of the opportunities. And all of this, keeping in mind how to be more relevant, and as there needs to be a business case, obviously, it should spark willingness to pay. So on the detox part, I think in essence, maybe looks a bit over-engineered. Again, that's for corporate environments, and in some cases, those kind of charts are useful and even asked for. So that's my apology at this point. So basically what it boils down to are 2 questions. So the one question is, what do I need? The second question is, what do I master? Again, this is shockingly easy, and if you look at how decisions are being pursued in daily life, it is everything but the norm. And then it usually helps if you categorize what you do. So there's a clear double yes is a part where you want to focus, a clear double no is a part that you would like to skip, and then there's the interesting part in between, which is usually where it gets a bit tricky. And this is actually also the reason running this exercise with the perception that there's a value network or a value creation network rather than a value chain, our classic thinking, also means that there are way more opportunities out there to partner than within the industry, and that's something that's very often forgotten. So again, if I look back at my times at Thomas Cook, the discussion was whom to work with and potentially whom to acquire, or there would be closer to the customer in travel or would be a supplier in travel. And we see that this linearity is being resolved into broad partnerships, and then you get those kind of partnerships of businesses that at the face of it don't have much to do with each other. Won't run through all the details on that. Obviously the strategy also isn't just do we partner or not. So far, if you look into corporate strategies, if you take the time and look into annual reports, or your consultants, and it's part of your job to look into annual reports, you find usually partnerships as some of the latest chapters that's being ended. And yeah, we're looking for partnerships. But this part of the strategy is becoming more sophisticated because it is more relevant. Partnership is not a last resort thing. If I really, if you convince me that I cannot do it myself, okay, I will partner up with someone. If my investor convince me to do so before they pull the money out, I will partner with someone. But basically, my ego tells me I should do everything myself because, after all, I have a great business. And that's it changing. And that also means there are obviously different kinds of partnerships and different notions. And I would argue that travel is a great place to look for this. I mean, if you only take those two, Marriott and Accor, obviously both very successful, obviously both based on an entirely different partnership strategy. Marriott working together with Alibaba and really picking the strongest partners to customers, while equally also building up their own brand. Accor, well, certainly also building up their own brand, but having a community partnership strategy where they look at local communities and partner up with businesses in those communities. Those are fundamentally different strategies for how to go about partnerships, and the point just is that partnership is requires a way more fragmented view on how to do this. You also get classical partnerships that all of a sudden turn into something else. Well, obviously Hopper very successfully offering flights, working together with airlines, and this is only one example where a company starts now lining up with the airline on specific skills. In the case of Hopper and Lufthansa, this is AI. Spinning off, probably the most prominent and successful examples, Agencia and Booking.com business, starting out with the idea, well, people that go on leisure trips with us, they probably once in a while also go on a business trip, or at least some do, so why don't we offer something, expand the portfolio, and at a certain point you realize there's a business, and then there needs to be that leap of actually bringing that into a different company, or at least a different governance, because otherwise, again, you get cluttered. If you would like a more eccentric example, and in case you happen to be or to visit San Francisco, make sure you stop by at Pier 9. It's a great place. Autodesk is, at the face of it, a very positively boring company with a market share internationally of somewhere north of 90%. I think in that arena it doesn't really matter anymore if you've got 90 or 95. Life is just good. So they are obviously into pretty much every deal and every architecturing going on in terms of skyscrapers. And at some point they thought, how can we possibly expand our business? And they found it tough to do so. Well, it was already quite big, but it wasn't them who came up with an idea. It was what they called a crazy customer who came up, and it was James Cameron, the director of Avatar, who in 2009 said, well, you guys do great buildings, that's all good, but I'm on a movie project where I need some animation on the screen. I somehow need to design that, and to me that looks a little bit like a building, so couldn't you help us with that? No, that's really not the business we're in. But then they at some point said, well, okay, let's at least give it a shot. So they've built a spin-off, and obviously Avatar, which Autodesk is supporting, and is quite successful. And in this Pier number 9, they've spun off a technology innovation camp, particularly based on this Avatar idea, on very broadly looking into manufacturing. That's an extreme example. But it refers to the thinking. The decluttering part I will just skip because I said that's a bit corporate. For those of you who are interested in this, I must admit, in my life before travel, so I used to be in science for quite a while. I'm a theoretical physicist by education, but that's long ago. No math to be expected in that presentation. I've forgotten all of this anyway. What I haven't forgotten are the great topics, and I'm a fellow at the Santa Fe Institute, and they work on how intelligence emerges in ant colonies. And I'm working together with them, not to do the research, couldn't do that, but to transfer that to organization. Because I just think there's lots to be learned from organization. I will stop that right here on that topic. I could go on for an hour. I very much like the topic. Maybe that's something for later. So lessons learned, mind new currency, that's something we haven't tapped on just very briefly. It's not only about the partnership business case in terms of money, it is increasingly so about, we had a session before, content, which content to offer and which data to offer. Again, that sounds very normal, but then again, if you look into M&A deals and how business cases look like, till a couple of years ago, it was still about the dollars or about the money, and then there were some bullets of adjacent benefits. This has totally switched to the point of that many business cases for partnerships are being calculated on data only, on content only, to not get distracted by money in the first place, and then as a subsequent chapter there's something on, oh yeah, and how do we finance this, and is there some money in this as well. So that's new thinking, rethink strategy and run experiments. Well, run experiments could go on for this, and we had sessions and participants from booking.com here yesterday. They can tell way more about this, and I just think that's a great reference place to go. Check out Customer First AI, what they do in that space. And rethink strategy, that's how I usually work with companies when designing those strategies for partnerships. What you do need, you need less expertise, you need a very broad screen and radar to screen opportunities and what to do. And this is why strategy sessions now, whatever the name is, in some areas of the world the term wargaming is preferred, some other prefer scenario analysis. It doesn't matter. The exercise just looks entirely differently. It's not some people sitting in a corner designing some charts, do some thinking and then communicating. It's usually extremely messy. Those are very messy exercises where you bring together representatives from all within the company or even beyond that, and run very interactive sessions. And that is needed, because otherwise you never get the amount of thinking and ideas on the table. That was it. Just a quick rundown on the topic. So I'm very keen to also learn on your experiences. I'm not sure if we have time for Q&A. Otherwise, we can also do that in the network, in the networking part. Okay, I just see we will stop this here to appreciating the time frame, and more than welcome. Please feel free to reach out, and again also to the organizer, thanks for the great event and thanks for having me. Thank you.